Build Propulsion Lab. I'm Brian Demers here at DevNexus, and I'm talking to Matt Brown from Endor Labs today. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Sure. Good to see everybody. My name is Matt. I'm a solutions architect at Endor Labs, and it's actually my first time at DevNexus.
Oh,
it's been
a great
awesome.
event. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, this is one of my favorite events of the year.
Yeah.
So, well, welcome for the first time.
Thank you.
There's a big raffle at the end, so if you haven't been to DevNexus, come over because you have to stay for that.
Absolutely. I absolutely will.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about dependencies today, and then we'll tie that into some productivity stuff. So let's get your view on what a dependency is first, because
Sure.
a lot of folks are probably thinking it's just a jar file.
Just a jar from maybe something from Maven or something like that, right? Now, it's typically what everybody has a view of. Like, what's a dependency? Oh, it's something from NPM, something from PyPy, something from Maven, whatever, right? But if you really kind of think about it, it's not just something from there. A GitHub action is a dependency, a Jenkins file is a dependency, an LLM is a dependency. So, like anything your software depends on to run could be considered a dependency that like you don't control, that's not yours, that you didn't make. So, dependencies are much more than just some from Maven, a jar. It could be really anything your software depends on.
Anything your software depends on. That's great. It's kind of like right in the name.
Easy, right?
Yeah. So what are the things developers should be aware of for their dependencies, especially outside? This is a Java conference, and many of you watching may also be Java developers, but outside of kind of your typical jar, what are the concerns with my dependencies?
So there's a bunch, right? And typically it's always been, well, what are the vulnerabilities and licenses issues, right? Do I have a vulnerability in Spring? Do I have a vulnerability in Apache Commons? Am I going to get my butt sued if I use this component, right? That's kind of always how it's been. Like these tools, like software composition analysis, they first started with just license issues. And they said, okay, well, you're already there, find the vulnerabilities. And it was like that for a while. But then in open source, you saw these other things that could introduce risk, right? You saw like name confusion or dependency confusion or single maintainer. That's another area of risk where something could happen, right? So when we think about the potential issues or risks of dependencies, it's not just vulnerabilities or licenses. We got to look at a lot of other things that could introduce risk. Like look at the XZ thing that happened last week. It was a single maintainer. They stored binaries in their repositories, and there was a really high number of rejected pull requests. Like those should all be red flags that you should kind of pay attention to. So we just want to get that information for these dependencies. Right?
Awesome. And as you said, it could be anything.
Yeah.
Right. So your OS.
Yep.
Whatever. Everything is a dependency to your app. So what should a developer do first, I guess, to learn about, I don't know, just this landscape, if you will?
Yeah, to learn about the landscape of learn what dependency hell is, and then avoid it at all costs. That's the first thing. Try to avoid it, right? It's kind of impossible to avoid sometimes, but you know, people say this term shifting left, right? And everybody thinks, oh, well, you got to be in the IDE for that. Sure, that's left, but even in the design phase of your SDLC, starting off with the right dependency can just solve so many problems that you may face down the line that you're not even going to have to be bothered by. Like, I used to be a developer in a previous life, and we would get a spreadsheet of 1,000 issues. You want to know where that would go? In the trash because of these vulnerabilities. I have to innovate. I have to build features. So something you may want to think about in doing is, hey, I need a component that does this. Let me look at a couple of different components. Let me just not pick the first one right away, because you don't know if you just look it up what issues could be present. So when somebody says it'll shift left, it's really about selecting the right dependencies from the get-go so you avoid a lot of these problems later. And I know that's easier said than done, but it's one of those where you put in the work a little bit beforehand. It can save you a lot of time afterwards down the line.
That's a great point. Neil Ford, did you go to the keynote on the first day?
I didn't know.
So Neil Ford was talking about similar things at an architecture level.
Yeah.
So I think that's recorded. So go check out
Definitely.
the DevNexus YouTube channel too.
Yeah.
But everything has trade-offs. And starting with something that you know can, whether it is scale or maybe it's healthier dependency, can definitely save you a lot of time as you go through.
Exactly.
All right, so what would you do if you were just starting to learn about, I don't know, security-related concerns with dependencies? How would you go figure that out? Because it's this big nebulous space that some folks don't have any idea about.
Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of surprises me every time I come to a trade show where I talk to developers, and I've been in software composition analysis for 4 or 5 years. Something that always surprises me is that folks don't even know a lot of the times that there is this phenomena of transitive dependencies where I know what I'm bringing in, but those are bringing in other dependencies. It's like that party you threw in high school, right? And then you invite all your parents, go away, you invite all your friends over, your parents come back, and then the house is trashed. Parents say, what the heck happened here? Well, I invited my friends, and they're cool. Like, I know my friends, but then they invited their friends, and those friends invited those friends, and those other friends, those are the ones that ruined the party. My friends are cool, but you don't know what you don't know. So I think the first thing to realize is this concept of dependencies, and that they bring in all these other dependencies. And even at the application layer, you bring in Apache Commons Text, that brings in a bunch of other dependencies, and those dependencies. So kind of getting a grasp on what is a dependency and what can it bring in. Like OWASP has a lot of really neat tools that you can view these dependency graphs and you can kind of visualize, okay, what is the map of these dependencies? So especially when it relates to like security, like look at the vendors for software composition analysis, look at OWASP, like they have a lot of really good tools. YouTube is always great, like you get a degree in YouTube almost kind of thing. I would definitely start with those kind of areas,
So I have not heard the analogy of the high school party.
Right?
But,
Not bad,
but that is now my new favorite.
There you go.
So I will steal that.
Please do.
I'll give you a little credit next time I use it. But it's my friends are cool.
Yeah.
I know them, but I don't know their friends or their friends of friends.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And they break the windows.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you implicitly trust them. You kind of have to trust them, but you don't know what's going to happen at the
Absolutely.
end of the day. You know?
All right, Matt. Well, we're kind of right at time here. So, what would you like to tell the crowd, either about your company or where they can learn more, or what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, just about Endor Labs a little bit. So, like I mentioned earlier, when you think of a dependency, yes, some from Maven, some from NPM, of course, but there's a lot of other areas that we can help with, and it's not just licenses and vulnerabilities. It's all these other areas of risk that could introduce problems potentially down the future. So our kind of main goal and vision is to help people secure and maintain their dependencies, whether that be something from NPM or Maven, whether that be a Jenkins pipeline or a GitHub action. And what we want to do to really help developer productivity is to say, okay, well, of my vulnerabilities and my dependencies, what am I using? What's reachable? And there's a statistic out there that's like, out of all the vulnerabilities you get from an SCA scan, we can reduce that noise down by 80% on average, anywhere from 70 to 90%, right? So when I get a JIRA ticket and I get all the facts of this is critical, this is reachable, this is exploitable, and I get that evidence to say, like, yeah, my method actually does call this vulnerable method 8 layers deep, that's not good code. Like, we got to fix that, and that gives me the evidence I need to do that. So that's what Endor does to help, and we're helping people every day with that.
Awesome. So it sounds like a developer has actionable data. They can just jump to specific code, fix that code, and just being aware of things and where to go. That cuts down a lot of time and debugging all by itself.
Context is king.
Yeah, I love it. That's great.
Awesome.
Well, Matt, I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thanks for being here, and welcome to DevNexus for your first time.
Can't wait for next year.
All right. Well, bye, everyone.